Good evening. So this evening we have Mayor Charbonneau and Councillor Schreider absent. So Deputy Mayor Matheson will be chairing the meeting, and you may begin.
Thank you, Linda, and welcome everybody to this planning meeting of the Corporation of the Town of Saugeen Shores. First thing is call to order, which we've just done. Second item is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add, delete, or put on? Seeing none, third item is disclosure of pecuniary interest, the nature thereof. Just a reminder that you can do that now or as the item appears on the agenda. Seeing none, we move to number 4, public meetings. This section of the agenda includes 2 public hearings held pursuant to the Planning Act. I would like to remind members of the public to contact the Clerk's Department at clerk@saugeenshores.ca to add your name and contact information to the public registry to ensure that you receive any information that may be circulated in the future regarding the application. Council will hear a report from the Bruce County Planner, followed by comments from the applicant and members of the public. The council will then be provided an opportunity to ask questions for clarification. Council will not debate or decide on an application during section 4 of the agenda, as both agenda items are for information purposes only. So our first application tonight is zoning bylaw amendment Z-2021-068. The applicants is Daniel David Payne, address 31 Bruce Road 25. I would now like to call upon our planner, Barbara Mugabe, to make her presentation.
Yes, good evening, Deputy Mayor Matheson, and good evening, committee. I'll just take a second here to load up the screen. Oh, I can't seem to get it.
Barbara, do you see it
Yeah.
on the screen now? Saugeen Shores hostess is sharing the screen.
Okay.
Are you able to see it? You can tell us when to advance the slides if that helps.
Yes, that will help. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Okay. So the subject land is 31 Bruce Road 25. It's situated to the west of Highway 21 in Saugeen Township. The site is 1.21 hectares or 2.47 acres in size. The slide that you're looking at shows a single detached dwelling with an attached garage. There's also a shed in the back of the property. The area, there are single detached dwellings on the abutting east and west properties. And there are farm fields to the north and south. I should mention that in regards to the farm field on the north side, those lands are draft plan approved for a plan of subdivision consisting of single detached dwellings and townhouses. Next slide, please. Mr. Payne has applied to sever one parcel for a residential building lot. In conjunction with the consent application, he has filed the subject zoning application. The severed lot is 1,294.9 square meters in size, or 0.32 acres, and has 20.12 meters of frontage along Bruce Road 23. The retained land has 40.84 meters of frontage and is 1.09 hectares in size. The next slide, please. The purpose of the statements. The purpose of this application is to amend the zoning bylaw by changing the zoning on the parcel to be severed from planned development PD to residential first density R1. No change is proposed to the zoning on the retained parcel. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, if you just go back. Yes, thank you. Back another slide, to slide 5, please. Yes, Okay, additional information. Saugeen Township is a settlement area, and according to the provincial policy statement, settlement areas shall be the focus of growth and development and consist of all developed lands and associated vacant lands where future urban growth is promoted. From a county official plan perspective, the site is designated urban primary communities. The policy directs most of the anticipated permanent population growth to primary urban communities. And amongst the permitted uses is a broad variety of residential land uses. The residential designation of the Saugeen Shores official plan also permits the full range of residential uses. The site is currently zoned planned development. This zone does not allow new residential development, hence the request to change to an R1 zone, which permits the intended use. And I should note that the severed lot will be 1,294.9 square meters in size, which is considerably larger than the requirement for urban fully serviced lots. The R1 zone requires a minimum lot area of 500 square meters for single detached dwellings. If you could just go back to slide number, let's see, just the previous slide, please. Yes, thank you. So I just wanted us to be looking at this particular slide so we can look at the subject land as well as some of the lots surrounding the subject land. Given the size of the site and that there is servicing in the area, I had discussed with the landowner that rather than servicing a single parcel, an opportunity exists for more dense development as it can be achieved on this site. The subject land is within the urban boundary, and looking at this neighborhood, there are still in existence some chunks of undeveloped and underdeveloped lands. The area is slated for residential development, and there is the expectation for this part of town to provide new growth opportunities. And in this regard, a compact small-scale subdivision or condominium development would be proper and orderly development. Such an approach to development or redevelopment of larger sites would achieve more growth in the area. And compact developments are more efficiently use existing infrastructure and public services and reduce urban sprawl. A neighborhood that includes more compact development can support more local businesses within its boundaries and will ultimately create a complete community. However, the landowner has a different viewpoint. He has explained that he has no interest in a subdivision or condominium development, that he only wishes to carve out a good sized single parcel of land to sell. Okay, the next slide. And the one after that, please. Okay. We have circulated the application to the departments and agencies for comments. We received no objection from Bruce County Transportation Services. The town of Saugeen Shores has commented that they have no objection provided the development does not limit the future development's potential in the area. They have indicated that this part of town has a lot of long-term potential to provide new growth opportunities in Saugeen Shores, and development which may limit the potential shall be discouraged. Town staff are seeking a 5% cash in lieu of parkland dedication. So this will be one of the requirements or the conditions that will be imposed to the consent process. Services shall be installed to the new lot at the expense of the proponent. The Ministry of Transportation has advised that the property falls within the Ministry of Transportation Highway 21 permit control area, that approval would be required for future site works, new construction or signs. The Conservation Authority advises that the property does not contain any natural heritage features. The application is satisfactory. The next slide, please. We have also circulated the application to members of the public, and to date, I have not received any comments. The next slide. As a summary, This zoning bylaw amendment is requested to change the zone on the subject lands from planned development to residential one. The amendment will facilitate consent application, which is seeking to create a new building lot for residential purposes, specifically a single detached dwelling. In terms of a recommendation, the recommendation is that the application be received as information. The intent is to get feedback from committee and from the community. And then I'll return with a recommendation report that will take into account the comments from tonight's meeting. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you for your presentation. Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? Mr. Payne?
No, I don't really have much to say. Barbara and I have been in contact quite a few times, and I think everything that she has covered there is accurate to all those interactions between us.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Are there any comments from the public in support or opposition to this application? I don't believe we have anybody online.
No, there are not.
Thank you very much. Does any council member have any questions regarding this application? None? I'm seeing none. That's great. So this concludes the public hearing for this application. I'd like to thank the applicant and the public for their comments. The report is only for council's information, and a planning report with a recommendation will be forthcoming at a future meeting. Our next application is zoning bylaw amendment Z-2021-073 Kings Lake Projects Incorporated on Highway 21 south of Concession 6. I would again like to call upon our planner, Barbara Mugabe, for her presentation.
Yes, thank you again, Deputy Mayor. It will just take me a second. I'll try and load this screen up. Okay, looks like it worked this time. This subject land is situated at the south end of Port Elgin, not too far away from Mr. Payne's property. There is no civic address. The legal description is part of Lot 9, Concession 6, the former geographic town of Saugeen. The site is on the east side of Godrey Street and Highway 21, and to the south of Concession 6 Road or Bruce Road 25. There is 122 meters of frontage, and the lot area is approximately 0.9 hectares or 2.2 acres. At the southeast intersection of Godrey Street and Concession Road 6 is Aunt Mabel's Motel. The subject land is immediately to the south of that property. And behind the motel are lands owned by the town. I understand it's Public Works Office and yard. Behind the subject land on the east side and adjacent to the south side of the town property are 3 existing single detached dwellings. And to the south of the subject land are extractive industrial lands. I understand there's a gravel pit in the interior of that site. On the west side of Highway 21 across the road from the subject land is a golf course. The site has been cleared of trees, it's vacant, and it does not contain any natural heritage features. The development is proposed in the form of 2 commercial buildings. The first phase proposed on the south side of the site is a 6-story hotel with 90 guest rooms. I understand the hotel guests will mostly be tourists and people coming into town on corporate travel. The second phase is proposed on the north side of the property, and it consists of a future 1-story restaurant with a drive-through and or retail or combination thereof. The next couple of slides are of the hotel elevations. In front of us at this moment is the front of the hotel building, which will face north. In June, Council passed zoning bylaw 47-2021, which increased the permitted building height of apartment buildings and non-residential buildings within a selected area of town to 20 meters. The subject lands are situated within the selected area. The height proposed for the hotel is 18.5 meters to the roof and 20 meters to the parapet. I understand the parapet is an extension of the roof feature. It serves to conceal rooftop mechanics. The ground floor will have a gross floor area of 872 square meters. The rest of the floors will each have a gross floor area of 980.2 square meters. The total gross floor area for the hotel will be 5,773 square meters. This is the rear or the south side of the hotel. This is the view of the hotel coming into town northbound. This is the west side of the hotel, directly facing the highway. It looks like the only windows will be in the hallways. There are no windows in the guest rooms, presumably to protect privacy of the hotel guests. The east elevation faces the residential properties and Gaius Road to the east. There is no direct visibility from the hotel rooms to the residential properties. Windows will be within the hallways. There will be none in the guest rooms. Therefore, the neighboring residents will not feel as if the hotel guests are watching them. The purpose of this application is to change the zoning on the site from planned development to highway commercial special holding. Relief is requested to reduce the landscaped open space from 30% of the lot area to 15.1%. Staff is recommending that the site be subject to site plan control to address building facades, landscaping, and engineering matters. We are also recommending a holding provision be affixed to the zoning to prevent development from occurring until site plan approval has been granted. Some additional information. As I mentioned, Saugeen Shores is a settlement area. The provincial policy statement directs urban growth to designated settlement areas. Opportunities for economic development and employment are encouraged. Development is to be connected to municipal water and sanitary sewer waste services are available. Transportation systems such as Provincial Highway 21 should provide for the safe movement of people. In this respect, the applicant has prepared a traffic impact study which supports the development. And in accordance with the provincial policy statement, the applicant has undertaken an archaeological assessment and has found no materials of archaeological significance on the site. In terms of the Bruce County official plan, the site is designated primary urban communities, and permitted uses shall be a broad variety of residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional land uses. The proposal complies with the county official plan. I should just mention that what seems to still be outstanding is that the applicant must address section 4.6.6 in relation to the Port Elgin Airport. There is section 6 to protect airports from incompatible development. New development and other sensitive land uses will not be permitted if they exceed a certain level of noise exposure projection. So, and I've advised the applicant, so they're aware of this section, they will be reporting back to us before I bring forward a recommendation report on the application. From the Saugeen Shores official plan perspective, the subject land is designated highway commercial. The designation is intended for large space extensive uses. The predominant use of land shall be for those commercial uses which, because of space and parking demand, are not compatible with the compact nature of the core areas, and or which are dependent upon a high degree of access and visibility to vehicular traffic on the main roads. A highway commercial policy also requires new standalone retail, office, and food stores to have a gross floor area greater than 300 square meters. Phase 2 of the proposed development involves a restaurant or retail store or a combination thereof. Any retail store located within this building will be required to occupy at least 300 square meters of floor area. Another requirement is with respect to landscaping. The policy requires that landscaping be provided between any highway commercial use or parking areas and the adjacent road. The proposal is for a 3-meter landscaped area along the phase 1 frontage. The applicant needs to extend the landscaping to the phase 2 frontage in order to address the policy. From a zoning perspective, the subject lands are presently zoned planned development. Only those uses that legally existed on the day of passing of the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw are permitted. Approval of this application is therefore required to permit the commercial development. The proposed minimum landscaped open space of 15.1% is significantly lower than the minimum requirement of 30% of lot area. And committee may recall, not too long ago, we had an application for Westdale at the north end of town. They had initially requested relief to reduce the landscaped area from 30% to 20.1%. Committee and town staff required the developer to increase the landscaped area to be closer to the minimum requirement of the zoning bylaw. Ultimately, that development was approved with the landscaping of 28% of the lot area. So just to be consistent in our approach to landscaping on highway commercial sites, I'm requesting that Kingslake also consider increasing the amount of landscaping to be more aligned to the zoning bylaw requirement. And similar to the county official plan, the zoning bylaw also seeks to protect the airport. Section 3.10.3b states that any building between 500 and 1,000 meters from the airport shall have a maximum height of 20 meters. The subject land is 700 meters from the airport. So it would seem that the proposed 20-meter height is in keeping with what's permitted. In terms of supporting studies, in addition to the transportation impact study, we also received a planning report and as well solar study drawings and a functional servicing report. I'll speak in a moment to the transportation impact study. The transportation impact study identifies and assesses the potential traffic impact resulting from the proposed development. The conclusions are just summarized below. With respect to site access, there's going to be a single all moves access along Highway 21. The access location, understand, will satisfy site distance and separation distance requirements. A southbound left turn lane with 15 meters of storage on Highway 21 is identified as warranted. However, the applicant is proposing the new access without a southbound left turn lane. And they've explained that this would be similar to the existing scenario where the 3 driveways in the vicinity do not have a southbound left turn lane. The Ministry of Transportation does not agree that the development can move forward without the implementation of the left turn lane. So the applicant and the ministry are still in discussions in that respect. The intersection of Highway 21 and Concession 6 is currently operating within acceptable levels of service. Then with respect to development trip generation, the development is forecast to generate 112 and 117 trips during the morning and evening peak hours, respectively. As for the background traffic conditions, the intersection of Highway 21 and Concession 6 is forecast to operate with acceptable levels of service under the years 2023, 2028, and 2033 background traffic conditions. With respect to the total traffic conditions, the intersections of Highway 21 and Concession 6 and the site access on Highway 21 are forecast to operate with acceptable levels of service under the years 2023, 2028, and 2033 total traffic conditions. The slide is one of the solar study drawings that have been submitted by the applicant. The hotel building is shown in red. The dotted red line shows the property limits, and the black is the building shadow. It is a common practice when high-rise developments are proposed for development proponents to conduct a solar study to demonstrate that the location and height of the proposed building will not cause undue shadow or undue shade. The architect has prepared drawings illustrating the impact of the 6-story development in terms of sun and daylight access to the surrounding buildings and the sites. The study was completed for all 4 seasons in March, June, September, and December, 4 times per day at 9:30 a.m., 12:30 p.m., at 3:30 p.m., and at 6:30 p.m. And for the most part, the hotel building shadow will be contained on the subject land. However, the December solar study diagram indicates that one of the houses to the east, I believe it's 20 Gaia's Drive, will be affected after 12 p.m. during the winter months. By March 21st, the shadow will be receding back towards the subject land. We have circulated the application to the departments and agencies for feedback and for comments. The town of Saugeen Shores has commented that without further justification or more detailed complementary site development features known, staff are recommending the developer reconsider the landscaping reduction. As this is going to be a gateway or landmark, landscaping to the built-up landscaping should be especially enhanced and detailed as soon as possible, so a holistic understanding of the area is generated. They've also indicated that the airport is close to the site. The applicant should ensure the height restrictions in support of the airport have been considered. The additional matters that the applicant has been advised of pertaining not so much to this zoning process, but to the site plan, applies to the site plan stage. The town staff have commented that there may be difficulty in servicing along or adjacent to the highway, that consideration may be given to provide servicing for the site through Gaia's Drive and the rear of the property. That vehicular access may also be considered through the rear of the property. They would like for the orientation of the building to be reconsidered to create a greater street presence, as this site is a gateway to Port Elgin. We have received no objections from the Bruce County Transportation and Environmental Services. As I mentioned, the Ministry of Transportation does not agree that a southbound left turn lane is not warranted at this site. Their formal comments are still pending. The Conservation Authority has no concerns with this proposal. There are no regulated environmental features on this site. Enrich Gas has requested that as a condition of final approval, that the owner provide the necessary easements and or agreements required for the provision of gas services for this project in a form satisfactory to Enrich Gas. As a summary, an application has been submitted to amend the zoning bylaw by changing the planned development zone to highway commercial. The amendment would facilitate commercial development of a 6-story, 90 guest room hotel during phase 1. Phase 2 consists of a 1-story restaurant with a drive-through and or retail or combination thereof. The special provision would reduce the landscaped open space area from 30% to 15.1%. Our recommendation is that the application be received as information. The intent, once again, is to come back at a future date with a recommendation report that would also take into consideration any comments that committee and members of the public would have given us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Barbara. Does the applicant wish to speak to this application?
Yes, good evening. Can I be heard okay? Super, thank you. And thank you for that, Barbara. I don't plan on taking too much time. My name is Ron Davidson. I'm a planning consultant and I represent the owner tonight. Just to go over a few things quickly here. So the lands, as Barbara said, are designated highway commercial in the official plan. They're zoned plan development in the zoning bylaw. The only zone that these lands can be placed in, according to the official plan, is in fact a highway commercial zone, and that's what we're asking for. The highway zone, the C3 zone, permits a hotel, and that's and a restaurant and retail stores of a certain size, as you heard Barbara explain. So that fits well. The C3 zone in this location also allows for a building having a building height of up to 20 meters. The zoning bylaw allows for that. And as council, you will recall about 4 or 5 months ago, maybe, you approved a housekeeping amendment that identified certain areas of Port Elgin where up to a 20 meter tall building would be appropriate. And the subject property is one of those. So we're not asking for relief from the building height. We're not asking for permission to build a hotel. We're asking for a C3 zoning, and the C3 zoning would permit a hotel up to 20 meters in height. But the one thing that is being requested, though, is certainly relief from the open space requirement. I know you've had this discussion before, and I've been involved in these discussions before. I'll get into that in a minute. I will say this, 30% covering a highway commercial property with 30% landscape does, in my opinion anyway, seem to be excessive. You know, it's an opinion, but it's a professional opinion. For what it's worth, Saugeen Shores is the only municipality in Bruce County that actually has a landscape open space requirement in the form of a percentage. Now, all other municipalities require planting strips along the various lot lines, as does Saugeen Shores. But again, those other zoning bylaws in those other municipalities don't have an overall lot coverage requirement. Now, don't get me wrong, making sure that a development is aesthetically pleasing through landscaping and other measures is very, very important. Again, as a planner, I get that. But again, it does seem somewhat excessive to require such a large amount of land to be grassed. Just to put things in perspective, if you're asking for 30% of the property to be landscaped, that's 3/4 of an acre of this property that has to be like with shrubs and grass, of course. And that's a lot. Like, I mean, highway commercial land is rare in Port Elgin and Southampton, and it's also expensive. And to require 30%, again, it seems excessive, especially when you can still end up with an attractive development, very attractive development with a lesser amount of landscape space. And you know, the owner is hoping that council will take that into consideration, their request. Before I leave that point, though, I would like to point out that about 2 years ago, I was part of a hotel proposal. Now, we haven't seen that take place. It was beside the motel or the Super 8 motel, but there's a proposal there and it's been approved, and the site plan agreement, I believe, has been approved. But there was a minor variance to allow for, ironically enough, a reduction in the landscaped open space requirement from 30% to 18.5%. I just thought I'd bring that to your attention. Just a couple last things in regard to some of the comments that were made from the agencies. MTO comments, yes, we're aware that there's a turning lane is required, and engineered drawings will be prepared to the satisfaction of the ministry for that turning lane. And that will happen after at the site plan approval stage, pardon me. We did see the town's comments come through last week. We responded to all of them, town staff comments about servicing arrangements. We've addressed that. The servicing arrangements or servicing will come from the north through the commercial property, the private commercial property to the north with an easement in place. Regarding access coming in from Geyer Lane to the east, well, that would have to come across private property, and there's no need for that since MTO has already said that we can get access directly from the highway. There's a comment from the town staff as well about height with regard to the airport, the building height requirements or restrictions are right in your zoning bylaw, and we meet those. That's it for my presentation. I'll be happy to try to answer any comments that come up. I guess I should add one more thing. Sorry, that we did invite the neighbors, the residential neighbors, to a meeting, and we sat down via Zoom a couple of months ago with them and talked about the proposal. But I understand that there's at least one set of neighbors that still isn't particularly thrilled with the height of the motel or the hotel. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Comments from the public. We have Mrs. Thornley.
Right. And I am that said resident. So good evening, Deputy Mayor Matheson and councillors. So yes, I am here to strongly oppose the Kingsley development for the planned 6-story hotel and restaurant to be located on Highway 21. My family has farmed outside of Port Elgin for generations, and we are proud to support our small community, shop locally, participate in sporting activities, and attend SDSS. 18 years ago, my husband and I chose to come back and live in Port Elgin to raise our family in this community. And while our community has seen significant growth over the years from the growth of Bruce Power and the lure of a beach town, you know, we can't allow commercial investment or adjusting building height bylaws to attract more development and take away from our small town appeal. The recent change in building height bylaws approved in June 2021 conveniently now allows the 6-story buildings to be built along a long stretch of Highway 21. And this will forever change the landscape and lure of what was once a small friendly town. So I do question though, does this height bylaw apply to hotel developments or only affordable housing developments? So that question can be answered at the end of the presentation. So we're not here to stop development in the town. We understand it's going to happen, but our recommendation is to reduce the height of the proposed hotel to 4 stories, consistent with the new Holiday Inn Hotel and other buildings in this town, or move it to another location. So my opposition to the location of the hotel is a case of literally not in my backyard. The proposed 6-story building would be 46 feet from our property line, and the hotel parking spaces 9 feet from our backyard. So the proposed height of the hotel is 67 feet, a towering 42 feet higher than our existing 25-foot cedar hedge. The shadows have been already indicated, will certainly cover our property. So I'd like to share photos of our existing view from within our house and outside. And you'll now see what I'll be looking at. So as you can see, for 18 years, I've worked from my home office, and this is my view, right? So the next slide is our kitchen, where my office is, and it's the heart of the home. And this is our nice view from our backyard, okay? And that's our cedar hedge, our 25-foot cedar hedge. And then the next slide is my attempt to show that it really will be my view from the backyard, right? And I'm sure it's going to be higher than that. Okay, so thank you for that. So as a result of this proposed development, so our family is now looking to relocate to another municipality as this is causing significant stress and anxiety on all our family members. So now we're faced with a serious disadvantage with the recent reduction in home values and skyrocketing, like, because who wants to have a hotel literally in their backyard? And with skyrocketing housing prices elsewhere and building costs. So now we're going to have to incur a mortgage with mortgage rates going up. So we will move to another community, leaving Port Elgin and our longtime support of this community, not to mention our tax dollars. So now we are being forced to move out of the area because a large hotel can afford to build and buy its way into the community. So what's best for our municipality's budget, like a proposed hotel, isn't always what's best for our Port Elgin residents. And who are you here to serve, the developers or the residents? So I recommend the town of Saugeen Shores reduce the number of stories of the proposed hotel to 4, or find another location that's not 46 feet from residential homes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Mary, and they'll be taken into consideration when we come back to this.
Thank you.
Does any member of council have any questions regarding this application? We'll start with Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I have a comment and a couple of questions. One of the sections of the report talks about that there should be low impact lighting in the parking area to reduce the impact to abutting residential properties. And I would like staff in the site plan control process, when we get to that point, to consider also the lighting impact of signage, outside hotel lighting, besides the parking areas. One of the sections of the report in transportation talks about the possibility of access from the rear in case of the issue with the MTO approval for the southbound left-hand turn lane. And I'm wondering how this would affect the 3 residential properties that are situated on Geyers Drive. How would that be possible? I'm not sure if Barbara or Jay might be able to answer that question.
Yes, if I may. I think the answer it may not be satisfactory tonight. We can certainly provide more analysis, but we want them to consider that option. If there isn't access opportunities from the highway, we want them to consider what it might be and what it would look like and how it might impact surrounding lands if it came from Geyers Drive. So that was why we commented the way we did. Okay, thank you. One of the comments from Mr. Davidson was the approved but not yet constructed hotel on the other side, on the east side of Highway 21, near the Super 8 Motel landscape, the Super 8 Motel. I've always admired the landscaping of the Super 8 Motel. And I just wondered if either Jay or Ron knows what the percentage of landscaping is there. I know that I'm just throwing that out. And not giving you a chance to prepare, but it just occurred to me when I heard Ron's comment on that.
If I may, I can look. I'm looking it up, but I can also comment if I'm permitted here to address the microtel landscaping. And yes, there was a reduction that was explored through minor variance. It was done in conjunction with a trade-off that the town worked with the owner of the Super 8 and the microtel jointly. They just happened to be the same owner, so it wasn't just a blanket reduction because we want to support hotels. It was that we needed to make sure landscaping of the whole Lake Ridge Drive area was improved. So it wasn't a reduction without conditions. Let me just put it that way. And I'm just seeing now my computer is freezing. The landscape open space of the Super 8 as of 2008, when the last sort of major review of the site works at that time were, it was, of course, they don't do it. Well, the building areas, yeah, I can't calculate it. I can't do that quickly. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I can
I'm
make sure
sorry.
you get the answer over the next couple days.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deputy Mayor, I have one more comment, and that's also to do with landscaping. So the report indicates that the proponent says, and Mr. Davidson made this comment tonight, that 30% of a landscaped area seems excessive for any commercial development, and that it's unlikely that the large landscaped open space requirement is intended to include outdoor amenity areas like play areas, because such features aren't necessary on properties such as gas bars, car washes, or equipment rental establishments. And as staff considers this, I would ask staff to consider that a hotel with 90 rooms in a prime vacation area is quite different from the needs of for outdoor amenity areas, quite different from the needs, such needs as would be needed by a gas bar, car wash, or an equipment rental store. Thank you.
Thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. And I have a few questions. Amanda, I was reading about the, the 15 meters of storage is identified as warranted. And I guess, where did that information come from in terms of 15 meters of storage is identified as warranted? According to which study was that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was from the traffic impact study prepared by the developer.
It was by the developer.
Mm-hmm.
So the developer, the study said that 15 meters of storage is warranted, and the MTO is saying that 15 meters is a left-hand turn lane is important, but the developer is saying, no, we don't agree with that. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might reflect that question back over to Mr. Davidson. I believe I heard from him that they were still discussing that with MTO or looking at more detailed engineering drawings.
Yeah, I just needed clarification on that point. I may have that wrong.
Yeah, that is my understanding, not correct, Mr. Myatt. In speaking with the owner today, he said he would be preparing the drawings to the satisfaction of MTO. If the zoning gets approved, he'd be doing that at the site plan stage. Definitely working with MTO. You don't have a choice when you deal with MTO. They carry, when I say they carry a big stick, it's a really big stick.
Can be pretty different.
Well, there's no way around it. We need we need an entrance permit, and B, we need I guess what they call a development permit or whatever the term is from them. So if you don't play by their rules, you simply don't get what you want.
Right. Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor, again to Ron. Ron, this is the gateway into Port Elgin. It's just a perfect opportunity if this development goes ahead. People driving in, looking at the right-hand side, they're looking at the back of the building. I was just wondering a few things. What was the reason for running the building east to west versus north-south? And what was the reason for having the, drivers of vehicles coming into town looking at the back of the building instead of looking at the entrance of the building? Why is the entrance on the north side, not the south side?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can explain to you why it's turned 90 degrees if that's one of your questions, and that's that hopefully helps with the neighbor. Instead of looking at the longest side of the building in their backyard, as we just heard from the one neighbor, they're looking at the shortest side, so that would help. It seems like, it's a drawing that was prepared by the architect. It seems like it's going to be a rather attractive looking building facade. But I didn't realize I didn't realize that would be a concern. If that is something that needs to be addressed, I can certainly get a better answer for you. Mr. Deputy Mayor, before the next meeting.
Well, I just wasn't understanding why drivers coming into town are looking at the back of the building. Why wouldn't they be looking at the front of the building, like, the entrance to the building? I just didn't understand why it's not turned around 180 degrees.
Yeah.
I don't.
I will get you an answer for that.
Okay. The 30% to 15% I really struggle with, and I hope that the developer would take that into consideration going back to our next meeting, in that, when the development happened, yes, the Holiday Inn Express, they were at 30%. They wanted to come down to 20. They ended up coming back up to 28. I understand some of your rationale, Ron. I just, this is just a perfect opportunity for us to, showcase a piece of property coming into Port Elgin with an enhanced landscape plan. I don't necessarily agree with the 15.1%. We'd like to see 30%. And I heard you say about we're the only municipality in Bruce County. That's okay with me. That's fine if we're the only municipality in terms of landscaping. Maybe we can't get to the 30, Ron, but I just like to see something come back, Mr. Chair, that takes a look at that, the landscaping, not at 1.1%. One of the questions I had was about the hedge with the residents on Guyer. I understand that better. That is their hedge, and that obviously would stay. It's that hedge, Mr. Davidson, is definitely on the residents' property. That none of that hedge would be removed, obviously, because it's owned by the owner.
That is correct.
Okay. Yep. The shadowing, I saw the model there. So can you bring that slide back up and show me what the shadowing does particularly in the summer months, what the shadowing does for those residents on Guyer? Can you bring that back up any chance?
Okay.
Thanks, Barbara.
Okay. Okay.
Can you show me the summer season, what impact it has, particularly in the summer? Not that I'm not concerned about, and the residents are probably concerned about other seasons, but show me the summer season, the impact of the residents on Guyer, what it does.
If I may, I had only included the December solar study because that's where we see the impact on the resident on Guyer Drive. But in the report, I think I had included all of the solar drawings. And let me see if I can find them. No.
Mr. Chair, I can see if I can share the screen for the solar screens here, if I'm permitted. So I don't know if members can see that. Barbara, you could describe the June shadow notes.
Okay, so in June at 9:30 a.m. and at 12:30 p.m. The shadow is entirely on the site as it is at 3:30 p.m. But we see that it's starting to move towards the east, but it's still contained on the site. At 6:30 p.m. we see that it has gone off the site. It's on the south side of the property as well. That's the property that I had said contains the gravel pit in the interior.
That's helpful. That's helpful, Barbara. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matheson. I too had a comment about the solar shadowing modeling that is presented here. While we're talking about it, I may as well start with that. It's funny, they picked the solstice as the dates for these things. And as you can see, the one that's provided in the package is a December 21st at 6:30 p.m. I can tell you with relative certainty that at 6:30 p.m. on December 21st, there is no shadows unless there's a moon in the west, because it gets dark around 4:30 in the afternoon. So I'm not sure which part of the world they're referring to on this one, but we all know that the shadows shift as the seasons go on. And I think that's what they're trying to portray, is that the different impacts during different times of the year. But that's just a comment. The other area that I was interested in speaking to was with regards to the traffic. And I know it's an MTO issue, and they're going to stipulate what is required, but just for information for the developer, and perhaps as they speak to the MTO, that there has been a roundabout proposed for concession 6 on Highway 21. I believe the director of communities of Amanda has applied for a grant for that just recently, Public Works, and so that may have an impact on the traffic flow. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the speed limit on Highway 21 at this section is 60 kilometers an hour. It reduces from 80 in the highway area. And as you approach the intersection of concession 6, it reduces to 60 at some distance south of where this property is being proposed. And 60 kilometers an hour is certainly slow enough for cars to be able to merge and turn, especially if they're going to install a left-hand turn lane, even though that section of highway can be very busy at certain times of the morning and evening during the shift change periods and that kind of thing. So that's to be made aware of. With regards to the landscaped area being proposed, I personally could live with a reduced landscape area on this site, particularly in light of the fact that it is surrounded on the south side and across the road by what formerly was a golf course, now is basically open, vacant land. The golf course is grown in, but it's surrounded by vegetation and green space on 3 sides essentially. And so I could live with a reduced landscape area, maybe not as low as the 15% that's being proposed, but somewhere in the low 20s might be more appropriate. But I also think that that a reduced height regulation. I recall distinctly when we spoke about raising the minimum height from 10 to 20 meters, it was in reference to encouraging developers to build apartment and rental accommodations. It was not envisioned, at least not by me anyway, or I believe that was not how it was being touted for hotel space. So the full 20 meter proposed here, I think, is something that the developer should perhaps look at again, and maybe a 12 meter or a 4-story. It would be more appropriate in this location, given its proximity to residential space on the other side, and proximity to the restaurant and motel next door, and the airport. Certainly another prime consideration. Even though it's within 750 meters, it's still going to be an imposing structure. I hope one day we do get buildings that are 20 meters tall, and I hope that they are built for the purpose of increasing our stock of rental and affordable housing. So that I don't think I have any questions buried in there, but I don't know if I see Ron's lit back up. If Ron has any comments on that, I'd like to hear it. But those are my thoughts and comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Davidson.
Yeah, if I may, and to be perfectly clear, I was not part of those discussions about your increased building height, but I was talking to staff, and I do have the bylaw, and for what it's worth, it's not worded in a manner that it just pertains to residential. It was for developments on those blocks and not necessarily for residential. I say that respectfully.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davinsky.
Sorry. one comment, and through you, perhaps to Ron Davidson, I'm not sure. Winter driving. This is going to be a 12-month-a-year hotel, and it's going to be in that area that you can't get at when the highway's closed. And so you could say, well, go around, but you're not planning to have entrance by way of Geyers Drive. Has this been considered by the developer?
Mr. Davison?
I would say it has not.
Well, that's something that obviously needs to be considered if for the consumers of this hotel, should it go ahead. As far as the landscaping and the height of the building, I agree completely with what Councillor Dave Mayette has said. But if you go ahead with this and it's approved, that winter driving is going to have to be addressed.
Thank you, Councillor Davinsky. That was a good thought. Any other comments from council members? I have just a couple thoughts. One, I don't know whether Mr. Davidson or Amanda can answer this. Has thought been given to the extension of a sidewalk along the east side of the road from concession 6? We have it right out to there with the new roads being done down to CAW and going up to the Lamont Sports Park. It'd be nice for people who are staying at the hotel to be able to get out onto the sidewalk to walk either to the Lamont Sports Park or into Canadian Tire, Walmart, or the Tim Hortons. Has any thought been given to extension of the sidewalk out to there? Mr. Davison?
Yeah, thanks. I see Amanda just popped up. I haven't been part of those discussions, and perhaps Amanda has been speaking with our engineer, Travis Bird's side on this project. If I may, through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, see if Amanda can answer that question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, that's not something that we have brought up with this proponent. Our lands are only 130 meters south of that intersection, and that's where the connecting link turns into corridor management for MTO. So at that point, it would be up to the ministry if that would be allowed as well. I'm not sure where the driveway falls into that distance, but we'll take that as a comment to look into before Barbara brings it back.
Thank you. Another comment I have for the development, when we built the the Holiday Inn, we asked that storage space be given for cyclists as they're coming into town as part of the transportation master plan. It's in there, our bicycle friendly committee. It'd be nice to see with the location of the hotel back close to the rail trails and cycling corridors, that space is developed in the building for the storage of bicycles as the people come to the hotel. Has any thought been given to that, Mr. Davison?
I could be wrong, but I believe that's shown on the site plan.
Is that's in the storage? I didn't quite see that.
I'm not sure, but that's another. I'm taking notes here, sir, and that's something that we brought up to the client.
Jay, you have a comment?
No, I was just going to say, yes, certainly a perfect comment for us to look at when we provide a detailed site plan review. So bike storage is something that's been on our mind from the time we first got it during the Microtel review, and we'll continue that discussion with the proponent if it gets that far.
Good. My last comment does have to do with the sun shadow. December is, as Councilor Mayette said, is one of the worst months for lack of sunlight. And the more that the sun, as it goes down, it takes away from the neighborhood. People do and are affected by the lack of sunlight. So I really like that to be looked at as we go along. Maybe it's just a realignment of the building going east-west instead of north-south. I'm not sure, but that's just something to look into. So thank you. So no further comments. This concludes the public hearing for this application. I'd like to thank the applicant and the public for their comments. The report is only for council's information, and a planning report with recommendations will be forthcoming at a future meeting. So thank you very much. We'll now move on to the committee of the whole to discuss reports on the agenda. We have no delegations, and We have 4 staff reports, and I will now call upon Jay Posner to present. The first item is a staff report, site plan agreement. Jay.
Yes, thank you, Don. So the first one is for 110 Goderich Street. It's the estate of Rosner right now being transferred to the Saugeen Shores Shopping Center, Inc. You might know it as Westell. It was subject to a previous official plan amendment zoning bylaw dealt with very recently. As you know, the development's for about a 6,000 square meter multi-building development of commercial space with a mix of retail, food service, and other commercial uses. To describe a bit of some of the attachments that are showing the overall building and works include full entrances along Devonshire and Goderich with a limited right-in, right-out only entrance along Devonshire, the entrance closest to Goderich Street. The applicant prepared a traffic impact assessment, which indicated that access with the proposed design is appropriate. It relieves some pedestrian conflict along the front of the largest building at the rear and allows more direct access to the smaller buildings at the front of the property for those accesses. There's also direct pedestrian access from both Devonshire and Goderich placed in a way to minimize conflicts with vehicles is something we're very happy to see and happy to have worked with the proponent on. There's enhanced landscaping along the Goderich Street corridor with pedestrian amenities and bicycle and scooter parking. And this is in a direct response to council's requirement that they re-examine how landscaping percentages developed. And so from the time the original public meeting was held, where they'd requested closer to 20%, they came back with 28%, and the direct result is wider landscaping strips across the highway frontage. A couple other nips and tucks in other locations, but mainly along the frontage, which is significant enhancement to the highway frontage in that location. There's some shaded parking islands, which is for larger parking areas, something we recommend, such as this. There's enhanced buffering adjacent to the residential uses at Elgin Lodge and along the west, particularly the complementary landscaping with these, young trees that are planted on the east side of the apartment complex from Summerside development. There's a pylon sign that's shown in the attached drawing that is scaled and located that is consistent with other signage in the area for large lot developments. I'm providing this here because the sign bylaw does not permit short signs, but if you want a larger sign and you have a site plan project, you can seek council approval for that. So the sign that's shown here is 7 meters in height. We're recommending this be approved because it consolidates all the signage of the property to one single pylon sign. It is taller than the 2.5 meters, but it's going to be the only advertising ground sign, at least that's permitted on this site. There might be some informational and directional signage that's installed, but that's not subject to this request. There are underground utilities for water, sanitary, storm servicing, and surface parking is complete with curbs and pavement markings. There's a full set of drawings available for review if you'd like. Part of our review included an assessment of how well this project addressed our design guidelines. As you can see in the report, I think they've addressed them very well. It's overall, quite excellent site plan from where it started prior to council approval to now, with enhanced, progressive and continual landscaping enhancements that were developed from initial submission to final review, adjustments for pedestrian access, safety, and orientation of the buildings that are conducive to creating a more pedestrian-friendly environment, especially in these highway commercial areas where pedestrian friendliness is sort of either foreign or not even imagined. Even 15 years, 20 years ago, it was not an urban setting at all. So as development has progressed, we've also tried to progress with a more pedestrian friendly environment. Accessibility Advisory Committee had a series of comments which the developer has addressed, and I've shown, and I think the attached, it's included here, it's attached to the end of the site plan, I think, where accessibility comments are the response of the developer is shown. They've gone line by line through each comment and indicated how they've been addressed. we're requesting delegation of any modifications or changes provided they're in conformity with the overall site plan, consistent with our development guide and compliant with the town zoning bylaw. This will help facilitate more timely approvals if unforeseen circumstances arise throughout the construction process. And in the agreement, we recommend the standard clauses applied with 2 exceptions. One is that there should be a clause which ensures the owner works with Lord Elgin Estates Developments to pay their fair share of the cost to build Devonshire. So when Devonshire was installed, Lord Elgin built that. They're entitled to some compensation. So we're requiring that be it considered or required rather. And that there's also a clause which addresses it, that we're still acknowledged that we're within the appeal period of the zoning bylaw. So there is that sort of a condition that this agreement won't come into force and effect until the zoning bylaw is actually in force and effect. So there's the report.
Thank you very much. So we have a recommendation that council pass a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement with Saugeen Shores Shopping Center, Inc. The council authorized the director to approve subsequent site plans associated with the subject lands, provided the site plans are in general conformity with the overall site plan, that they are consistent with the town's development guide and compliant with the town's zoning bylaw, and the council pass a bylaw which lifts the holding provision from the subject lands. Any questions or comments to the recommendations? We'll start with Councillor Mayat.
Me? Nope. I never get to go first. Oh, thanks, Chairman Matheson. First, my comments are that I sincerely appreciate that the developer has gone back and rejigged and reworked some of the concerns that were brought forward in the initial meetings. That the landscaping has been brought more in line with what are the town's requirements, and I think they've gone a long way to do that. The AAR guidelines. One question I have is in the agreement, it says that a permit shall be obtained within 1 year, or the agreement is null and void. Is that a normal clause, a 1 year agreement, 1 year time slot? Jay? Yeah,
it's pretty standard for us, where we want them to build in a timely way. I mean, we don't want our time wasted, but more importantly, some of our standards change with time, and we want to make sure that all of our developments keep up with the modernization and development of our standards. So we've had experiences where site plan's been approved and then a building's never been built. And so our lesson from that was, well, why do we have these agreements around when all of us will be surprised 10 years from now if someone got a permit? So let's try to keep the development going that way.
And that, as you indicated, that clock would start ticking at the time that we pass the zoning bylaw?
I'm not sure when the clock is. Generally, we give a fair amount of time, and that's usually from the date of the agreement. I don't have this specific clause. If you can point to me, I can provide a more specific interpretation.
Oh, it's towards the second to last page, I believe, of the agreement.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if I off the top of my head, so yeah, that's right. It's off the top of my head, I can't find it. So
yeah, that's okay.
Okay,
I'll see if I can find it quickly as I'm talking here. The last thing I had to say is, although it's not mentioned in this report, I have spoken with the former family of the owners of the property, and the barn, although it isn't going to obviously be there, that there will be an extensive repurposing of the materials to the extent possible of that historic barn structure. Obviously, these barns are becoming fewer and farther between, and being an owner of one, I appreciate that there's a lot of history and a lot of and they form part of our rural landscape. And it's a shame that anytime we see one taken down, but it is good to know that there is a repurposing of the barn boards and the barn beams and whatever other materials can be salvaged out of those things. So that's a good sign. So based on that, I will be supporting this application. Thank you.
Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions. First, I wanted to make a comment that I appreciate the proponents' considerations and revisions based on the Accessibility Committee's suggestions and comments. a question for Jay. As part of the site plan process, have you seen diagrams of the proposed design of the buildings?
Yes, so I've given a a typical elevation, if you mean the elevations or you mean the building.
I mean, what
interior.
it's going to look like, the design.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen any interior work. I've only seen the building elevations as through this process. So we've practiced in collecting. So I'm not familiar with what the interior might look like.
Okay, I'm really not thinking of the interior, but I'm thinking of the exterior design, and I'm wondering if we can encourage the developers to please make a design that's consistent with the Port Elgin Community Brand Toolkit, using such materials as yellow brick or horizontal siding or board and batten, something like that. Especially, I think, since, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilor Mayette, but I think the original farmhouse is yellow brick, and yellow brick is a common building feature that's featured in the toolkit. But in our area, you see a lot of yellow brick.
So we do have, we have in that reference to that, we have seen the building elevations. I've shown them here on the page 6, I guess. The typical building elevation has a horizontal siding. It has, some, sandier colored brick elements. They're not meant to be sort of a strict adherence to the sort of Port Elgin brand beat Boardwalk vibe that our general function through site plan reviews to enhance the target the landscaping for that with beach type grass or features that sort of call back to the boardwalk vibe. So there's, I don't know who's sharing this, but there's a building elevation with this sandier brick and the horizontal siding.
Okay. Well, I was kind of hoping for something that might be a little more lakeside, charming kind of character, but anyway, my other question is, you talked about the pylon sign, and I think you said the height is 7 meters.
Yes.
And how wide is that sign?
It's 11 feet, so about 3 and a bit meters.
And how would that
meters.
compare with the pylon sign that's out in front of the giant Tiger Plaza at the south end of town?
The one that's with Giant Tiger is less than 6 meters, but there are signs that are closer to 6 meters in other parts of, particularly the north end of Port Elgin.
Okay, and so then why are we going to 7 meters on this one?
Because I felt the amount of information, how it was laid out on the sign that's shown was appropriate.
And are there the same number of businesses in this as in the Giant Tiger? Like, are there more businesses that would require a taller sign?
Yeah, there's 2 more stores as of right now that we're aware of, though there's more divisions potential based on the buildings that we've been showing.
Okay, well, my preference is to try and be shorter as opposed to taller, but I understand your reasoning there. My last question is about clause 29 of the proposed agreement, and it's talking about the lighting. And it says that any lighting of the land shall be installed in such a manner as to deflect the light away from adjacent streets and properties. Does that word land, is that intended to include all of the lighting of the buildings and signs involved with this development?
We take it to mean that this is a standard clause of our template agreement. So we apply that clause in all cases. So my understanding is that's how we apply it.
Okay, thank you.
May I go back, Mr. Chair, from Councillor Grace, who's Councillor Mayette's question about the building permit. I found the clause. It was pointed out to me by Amanda, number 27 about the building permit. Yeah, that's a standard clause. We would like them to get a building permit as soon as possible.
Thank you. Vice Deputy Mayor Mayette.
Yeah, both my questions have been answered, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but I just wanted to reiterate, I just want to congratulate Saugeen Shore Shopping Center again for the enhanced landscape plan. I think it just proved that a little bit of pushback sometimes can pay dividends, and we're looking after the environment, we're looking after our green space gateway, and I think it's really important to do what they did. So I just wanted to, Jay, pass on our thanks. I think they've done a wonderful job with the landscape plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Davinsky.
I'm in late, so this may not be an issue, but through you, Mr. Chair, to Jay Posner, have the residents in the area, have they been kept up to date on this development, and have they had a chance to voice their concerns? I suppose that's part of the appeal period too.
Yeah, no, it's a good question to ask. I mean, certainly we want to ensure the neighbors and property owners are well informed. And through this process, actually not through the site plan process, through the official plan and the zoning bylaw process, the developer had provided a fairly detailed site plan as part of their submission, which was provided and made available to members of the public that requested it and went online. And so, yes, they've been kept informed and given an opportunity. Yes, you're correct. It's still in the appeal period. Yes, and I'm not sure, there might only be a couple weeks left, but this is their opportunity if they still are concerned to launch an appeal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Our next staff report is a site plan agreement with Ernest Properties, Inc. of Saugeen Street. Once again, I call on Jay.
Yes, this one also is familiar to council. This was subject to a rezoning earlier in the summer. They were rezoning a vacant piece of land, hoping to build a 4-unit townhouse project. Council approved the zoning bylaw, and now we're at the site plan stage. So what this is for is a 4-unit townhouse. I'll repeat that again. It is outside the applicable lands for the design guidelines, but it is within we still use our development guide to help with the engineering standards. Engineering staff reviewed the drawings and they're acceptable. Accessibility Advisory Committee commented. And the developer's comment is provided in the report as to how they're addressing those comments. Likewise, with delegation, we recommend that the director be delegated the authority to approve any modifications or changes to the drawings that might come up, unforeseen through this process. And again, our standard clauses, with one exception in this case, that because it was such a topic being discussed during the zoning process, that matters pertaining to the long-term rental of the townhouses be included in any of the land division or consent applications for the subject lands. I think that's the appropriate legal vehicle to deal with the tenureship of the property and not through site plan. Literally, the consent is about how land may be transferred. So I think that's the appropriate time to include either an agreement or otherwise address that concern through that process.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation that council pass a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement with Ernest Properties Incorporated. That council authorize the Director, Infrastructure and Development Services to approve subsequent site plans associated with the subject lands, provided the site plans are in general conformity with the overall site plan and compliant with the town zoning bylaw. And the council pass a bylaw which lists the holding provisions from the subject lands. Any questions or comments to the recommendations? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment to thank the developer for taking into consideration the accessibility features that were suggested and recommended by the Accessibility Committee.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Mayette.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, I don't see anything in the report that mentions that these were purpose built for rentals, right? These are not going to be separated and sold. Is that still in effect?
Well, certainly this site plan process is separate from that discussion. That's what I'm recommending here. In fact, it's where that the site plan is dealing with the construction of the structure and not the operations of it. And in the case of the severance or consent process is where the long-term rental of those units can be secured. If that's something council wants to do, I'm recommending that.
Okay, so he's keeping it all as one tax bill for the four buildings, right?
Well, today that's the case. I mean, certainly Mr. Ernest, the owner, has expressed his wish to sever the land, but he wishes to continue renting them. There's some financial vehicle, that tool that he's using. Nevertheless, today is one plot of land to build as a single structure with it that can't be transferred. So if he applies for severances and if they're approved, and if he wants to clear those conditions, we're recommending that we deal with the long-term rental through that process.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Good, then we'll call the question to order. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. That moves us on to number 3, staff report for site plan agreement 5035423 Ontario Inc. Learn Fit at 78 Albert Street in Southampton. And once again, Mr. Posner.
Yeah, so this one is another project at least a few members will be familiar with. This was the subject of a minor variance a few months ago, in which they were requesting to build an addition generally where the current addition is except setback further from the road. So the way our zoning bylaw is structured, that in the commercial core zone, which this is zoned, you can build only within either the 0 setback line at the road or very close to it. And they originally had wanted to build the addition with a bit of a parking area, a plaza out front. I just bring that up to your attention and have emphasized it a little bit to note that they're not using the power or that they were granted from the Committee of Adjustment. Instead, they're building to the zoning bylaw under its current form. So the addition is that there's an existing commercial building and they want to build an expansion to accommodate an expansion to the fitness center. And so the addition extends from the existing front towards the street with a similar but new facade that has the roll-up overhead doors with a refreshed facade that is more sensitive to the environment. The site also reorganizes the parking into a more appropriate design for the site, vegetative screening, and I think it's shown on the attached drawing. Yes, it is. It was sort of modest before, is being enhanced along the west edge and along the south boundary to, I've said significantly enhance that part. You can judge that if you'd want. It's definitely improvement from what exists today. The applicable design guidelines are that the scale and massing, the development should be consistent with the residential character of the area. The front facade integrity should be maintained. And that's sort of the idea, is that they have the buildings set back in more or less the same area with the same look and feel. Anyway, in my view, the scale is consistent with the residential character. And as for the integrity of the front facade, proposed addition is a notable improvement. Orientation, we definitely want to enhance that pedestrian environment in all parts of town, even more so in the commercial core. Access directly to the street should be a priority. So the entrance is here. The overhead doors will open to the street. They're accessible to the street. Parking and landscaping. Parking should be at the side or rear buildings. It's exactly what's proposed. They had originally proposed some at the front. Well, now it's all at the side and to the rear of the project. Accessibility had a series of comments which the developers addressed as outlined in the report. I'll repeat the delegation request that's also recommended. In this case, the agreement is the standard with no special clauses. So the drawings that are attached to the agreement in this report will be approved as they are.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation. The council passed a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement with 5035423 Ontario Inc. And the council authorized the Director, Infrastructure and Development Services to approve subsequent site plans associated with the subject lands provided site plans are in general conformity with the overall site plan, and they are consistent with the town's development guide and compliant with the town's zoning bylaw. Any questions or comments to these recommendations? I have one. Jay, you said they're going to be now parking at the rear of the building, so that means they'll be coming in off of the lane?
No, that's not my understanding, although they may access that informally. The parking area that's shown here, they would come in on the south side, proceed to the rear, and they sort of, it's not all the way to the rear, but they kind of informally wrap around. You can sort of see it in the drawing where the number 21 shows up, and it's where the parking area sort of extends beyond the back of the building.
Because there are rental units back there, correct?
Yeah, I think there's at least, Cole and his partner live there, but there could be others.
Very good. Any other questions? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes. On to staff report number 4, Bill 13, Supporting People and Businesses Act. And once again, Jay.
Yes, so this is a running theme of both of this provincial government. They're at least advocating vocally how they are trying to streamline and improve conditions for business in Ontario. This Bill 13, among a slew of acts that are being changed, it includes a change to the Planning Act that has the potential to streamline development approval for regular minor developments. I recommend we support through the Environmental Bill of Rights posting support for this change. The change that's at least related to the Planning Act is in line with how we've been trying to develop a system that helps development and facilitate appropriate growth in our community that's flexible for the community's needs. So in this case, the bill would allow the delegation of the passage of minor bylaws. I'll use the air quotes, minor bylaws, to staff or to a committee or to some other organization. And what this means is that something like a lifting of a holding provision, that's usually a fairly technical exercise. The holding provision gets lifted when an agreement is entered into. You don't need to have a bylaw that comes to council. That could be delegated to staff and then dealt with more expeditiously. Other minor bylaws, because they don't define what minor is, could be considered. And so I've expressed, well, maybe those are bylaws that pass that are generally tied to surplus farm dwellings. You've heard Mayor Charbonneau talk about the difficulty he has with that type of process, the sort of cumbersome nature of that. There could be other minor bylaws. I've said perhaps there's a way of facilitating more attainable housing through the minor approval system. One thing that would need to be considered, because the Act makes it clear all other elements of the Act still apply. In other words, you still have to provide notice to the community and to agencies. You still have an appeal period. You still have to have a public meeting in many cases. We might want to consider our procedural bylaws. And so that's why our recommendation goes, an extra step to say, perhaps we could facilitate the start of the official plan amendment that would be required and examine the entire process for these minor bylaws. And I won't go on that one, sorry.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation. The council directs staff to provide comments in support of Bill 13, specifically pertaining to matters relating to the Planning Act, and the council directs staff to initiate an amendment to the official plan to enable delegations to passage of minor bylaws to committees of council or a staff person when and if the act comes into effect, and return to council with a recommendation. Are there any questions or comments to this recommendation? Councilor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but are we not doing this already? We have a minor variance committee, and we just a moment ago delegated the site plan responsibility to staff for parts of that. Are we not doing this? Is my first question. And is this bill more directed at larger cities where you wouldn't involve council necessarily on things that are at a community level? And what my understanding is, our minor variance committee is not necessarily overwhelmed with minor variances and minor bylaws, that they handle them In fact, sometimes they have no agenda to adhere to. So just, is that what I'm reading here, or am I off base?
Well, I wouldn't say that you're off base. I guess my opinion, I'll set aside my own philosophical or professional opinion about what might be more effective for small town versus large city, or even Saugeen Shores versus any other community in Bruce County. I'll say the idea is that it's just to allow more flexibility. Like we have the discussion with development charges. We're not saying you shall have development charges. We're just saying if you want it, you can do it. In this case, if you want to delegate your minor bylaws to staff or to a separate committee that aren't related to minor variances. So for like a holding provision, you can't delegate to committee of adjustment. Just can't. The act doesn't allow it. But if you want to have that flexibility, council can choose to do that.
I'm all for more flexibility.
Very good. Any further questions or comments? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So next I have a motion. But before I get to that, I just want to remind members of council and those watching tonight that our next meeting is Monday, the 22nd, where we have regular council and committee of the whole. And the following week on the 30th is our first budget presentation. So stay tuned for lots of information coming with that. So I have a motion that this planning committee meeting of November 15th, 2021 hereby adjourns at 8:05 p.m. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Grace. All in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.